A low hum filled the sterile air of the alien lab, interrupted only by the occasional hiss of machinery. Ethan, bound to the cold, metallic table, squinted against the bright lights overhead. The fluorescent glow illuminated his surroundings: glass containers housing strange, swirling substances, and monitors displaying incomprehensible data. The alien scientists hovered nearby, their sharp, multifaceted eyes flickering with a mix of curiosity and cold calculation. "Prepare the next batch for analysis," Zaira, the lead scientist, commanded, her voice crisp and authoritative. Her elongated fingers danced over the controls with practiced ease. "We must understand how their biological systems can withstand such extreme conditions." Ethan struggled against his restraints, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "You're making a grave mistake," he shouted, his voice hoarse but firm. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Kaowyan, Zaira's assistant, paused and glanced at Ethan, his brow furrowed. "What makes you think you can intimidate us, human?" His tone dripped with disdain, yet a flicker of doubt crossed his features. Ethan took a breath, feeling the heat of urgency. "You think we're just animals to experiment on. But you've underestimated humanity. You'll regret this." Zaira turned sharply, her expression a blend of annoyance and fascination. "Regret? You're hardly in a position to make threats. We have dissected and studied your kind for centuries. We know more about your biology than you think." With each passing second, Ethan's fear morphed into determination. He couldn't let them exploit his species for their monstrous agenda. Memories of laughter, love, and resilience surged within him, fueling his resolve. "You're right," he replied, a glimmer of defiance in his eyes. "You've studied us, but you've never truly understood us. Humans adapt. We survive." The lab door slid open with a whoosh, and a group of alien guards entered, their angular forms silhouetted against the bright lights. The guards scanned the room, their expressions unreadable. Ethan's heart raced. He knew he had little time. "Prepare him for the experiment," Zaira instructed, her voice unwavering. The guards moved closer, and panic threatened to overwhelm him. This was not just about his life anymore. It was about humanity's future. Ethan glanced at Kaowyan, who appeared conflicted, uncertainty etched across his face. "You have a choice, Kaowyan. You can help me escape, or you can watch your people make a catastrophic mistake." The words hung in the air, charged with tension. Kaowyan hesitated, his gaze shifting between Ethan and the approaching guards. "What do you propose?" he asked, his voice low. "Free me," Ethan urged, desperation creeping into his tone. "Help me turn the tables on them. Together, we can disrupt their plans. You've seen what they do to us. Are you willing to be complicit?" Zaira noticed the shift in Kaowyan's demeanor. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "You are a scientist, not a traitor." "Am I?" Kaowyan shot back, his voice trembling. "You've become the real monster here, Zaira. This isn't just science anymore." Ethan seized the moment. "We can expose their weaknesses. We can fight back." Zaira's expression hardened, fury and fear clashing in her gaze. "Enough! Secure him! Now!" As the guards advanced, Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. "If I die, you'll never understand what humanity is capable of. Let that haunt you." The tension snapped like a taut wire. Kaowyan took a step back, his resolve crumbling. "I can't let them do this. Not anymore." With a sudden motion, he lunged toward the control panel, fingers flying over the buttons. Ethan's heart raced with hope and fear as alarms blared through the facility. The lights flickered ominously, casting shadows on the walls. In that instant, chaos erupted, providing the distraction he desperately needed. "Run!" Kaowyan shouted, eyes wide with determination. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline as he broke free from his restraints. It was now or never. With a quick glance back at the bewildered Zaira, he bolted into the labyrinthine hallways of the alien facility, Kaowyan hot on his heels. Together, they raced toward freedom, driven by the instinct to survive against overwhelming odds. Humanity was about to show what it meant to endure, and the galaxy would never forget it. The sterile corridors of the alien facility echoed with alarms, their blaring cries mingling with the distant sound of hurried footsteps. Ethan sprinted ahead, heart pounding in his chest, fueled by a cocktail of adrenaline and fear. HFY, close behind, cast anxious glances over his shoulder as they navigated the labyrinthine passages. The walls, slick and metallic, seemed to close in around them, intensifying the urgency of their escape. "Where do we go?" HFY gasped, his breath ragged from the exertion. "This place is a maze." Ethan skidded to a halt, his mind racing. "We need to find an exit. Somewhere they won't expect us to go." His eyes darted around, scanning the dimly lit signs. "The service tunnels! They have to lead us out of here." HFY nodded, determination hardening his features. "Lead the way." They veered left, entering a narrower passageway that branched off from the main corridor. The sudden shift from the bright lights to a gloomier atmosphere felt suffocating. The sounds of pursuit echoed closer, sharp and insistent. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to hurry. As they sprinted, he turned to HFY, noting the worry etched across the alien's angular face. "Why did you help me back there?" he asked, breathing heavily. "You could have just stood by and let them capture me." HFY's expression softened, revealing a glimmer of vulnerability. "I thought I was doing the right thing, studying you as a specimen. But then I realized, I'm just as trapped in this system as you are. We're both pawns." Their footsteps echoed off the walls, a rhythmic pulse that underscored the urgency of their flight. "Pawns can become players," Ethan replied, his voice steadying. "But we need to outsmart them first." The corridor twisted into a wide junction, where various paths branched out like the veins of a giant organism. Ethan scanned each option, desperate for a clue. To the right, he spotted a faded sign that read, "Service access." "There!" he pointed, leading them down the dimly lit corridor. As they ran, Ethan's thoughts raced. He needed a plan. "Once we're out, we'll have to find a way to signal Earth. They have no idea what's happening here. We're not just escaping, we're going to expose these monsters." HFY's eyes glinted with something akin to hope. "You really believe your kind will rally behind you?" "Humanity doesn't back down from a fight," Ethan replied firmly. "If they see what's happening here, they'll join us." Suddenly, the sound of heavy boots thudded closer. The guards were gaining on them. "We need to move faster," HFY urged, panic creeping into his voice. Ethan turned sharply, taking a left into a narrow service tunnel, barely wide enough for their shoulders. The air turned stale, carrying the faint scent of oil and machinery. As they pushed deeper into the tunnel, the sounds of their pursuers faded into the background, but the silence was unsettling. "Do you hear that?" HFY whispered, his voice low and tense. Ethan strained to listen. Just beyond the dull thrum of the facility, he caught a rhythmic thumping. "It's just the machines," he reassured, though his instincts warned him otherwise. "Keep going." As they continued, the tunnel widened into a dimly lit room filled with rusted machinery and discarded equipment. Flickering lights overhead cast ominous shadows. An ancient control panel sat against the wall, its screens displaying static and erratic symbols. "This might be our chance," HFY said, stepping toward the panel. "If I can access the system, we might be able to disable the alarms and create a distraction." "Do it," Ethan urged, glancing back toward the tunnel. "We don't have much time." HFY's fingers flew over the controls, his expression shifting from concentration to frustration. "It's outdated." "I'll need a moment." Ethan kept watch, nerves fraying as the echoes of approaching footsteps grew louder. "Hurry! They're coming!" Just then, HFY's eyes lit up. "I think I can override the security protocols." As he worked, Ethan's heart raced, anticipation thrumming through him. "We can't stay here much longer. We need a way out now." Suddenly, the door to the room rattled, and the guards shouted orders, their voices cutting through the tension. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't let them be captured again. "HFY, we need to make a decision." "Now!" Ethan exclaimed. I'm almost in, HFY shouted back, a flicker of triumph in his voice. Almost isn't good enough, Ethan snapped, glancing at the door. We need to act before they break through. In that moment, a sense of urgency propelled Ethan forward. I'll distract them. You finish your work. If I don't make it... HFY's gaze hardened. You will make it. We will both make it. The door buckled under the force of the guards' battering. Ethan's resolve crystallized. Just get us out of here. He turned, bracing himself as the door splintered, ready to face the onslaught. As the door burst open, Ethan clenched his fists, determination surging through him. I'm not giving up my humanity without a fight. The guards flooded in, weapons raised, but Ethan stood ready, defiance igniting in his chest. Let's show them what we're made of. The air crackled with tension, the clash of life and death looming as the fight for freedom began. The guards surged into the cramped room, their armored bodies filling the doorway like a wall of muscle and malice. Ethan braced himself, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he faced the chaos. He barely registered the flickering lights overhead, the shadows dancing wildly across the walls as his mind narrowed in on the immediate threat. On the ground! Now! One of the guards barked, his voice laced with authority. The glint of his weapon caught Ethan's eye, a cruel reminder of their oppressive power. No chance! Ethan shouted, his resolve hardening. With a fierce battle cry, he lunged forward, aiming for the nearest guard. The clash was brutal, metal against flesh. Ethan's fists found their mark, a series of rapid punches connecting with the guard's midsection, eliciting a grunt of surprise. HFY, standing near the control panel, watched with wide eyes. What are you doing? We need to escape. I'm buying you time, Ethan replied, ducking under a swinging arm and countering with a sharp elbow to the guard's jaw. He could feel the heat rising in the small room, the panic threatening to overwhelm him. With every second, the odds stacked against them grew heavier. Just as the first guard staggered back, another rushed in, a weapon aimed straight at Ethan's chest. In that split second, time seemed to stretch, and Ethan instinctively shifted his weight, rolling to the side as the guard fired. The shot ricocheted off the wall, a blinding flash illuminating the room before plunging it back into darkness. Ethan! HFY shouted, panic spilling over. You can't take them all on! With a desperate surge of strength, Ethan grabbed a metal pipe from the floor, brandishing it like a sword. I'm not leaving you behind! He growled, adrenaline pushing him forward. The clang of metal on metal reverberated as he swung the pipe, catching the second guard off guard. The guard stumbled, the surprise on his face quickly morphing into rage. Get him! The lead guard roared, lunging toward Ethan, but the human was quick. He sidestepped, allowing the guard to stumble past him. HFY finally found his voice. I'm in. I just need a moment. His fingers danced across the control panel, sweat glistening on his brow. I can create a distraction. Just hold them off a little longer. Ethan gritted his teeth, taking a defensive stance as the lead guard circled back, his eyes alight with fury. You'll pay for this, he spat, lunging again. Ethan swung the pipe, connecting with the guard's knee, sending him crashing to the ground. But there were more guards, and they were relentless. A swift kick from another knocked Ethan off balance, and he stumbled. Before he could recover, a heavy boot landed on his chest, pinning him to the floor. Stop fighting! You're outnumbered, the guard barked, pressing down with his full weight. Ethan gasped, straining against the pressure, the air rushing from his lungs. I will not be a pawn, he shouted defiantly, channeling every ounce of strength he had. With a swift motion, he brought the pipe up, catching the guard under the chin, sending him reeling backward. Now! HFY shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. The control panel flickered, and the alarms blared in response, the sound echoing like a siren of freedom. Red lights flashed, illuminating the room in a strobe of urgency. The guards faltered, glancing at one another in confusion. What's happening? One yelled, scrambling for his communicator. Now, Ethan! Go! HFY urged, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. Fueled by KRYN's urgency, Ethan rolled to his feet, eyes darting for an escape route. He spotted an emergency exit at the far end of the room, the red light above it pulsing ominously. "That way!" he shouted, pointing. "Let's move!" As the guards regained their composure, Ethan and KRYN bolted toward the exit. The sound of heavy boots thundered behind them, but Ethan pushed on, his heart pounding in rhythm with their footsteps. They burst through the door, tumbling into a narrow hallway that twisted and turned like a serpent. The sharp smell of ozone mixed with the metallic tang of fear filled the air. "Where now?" KRYN gasped, urgency painting his features. Ethan turned left, instinct guiding him. "We need to reach the hangar. That's where they keep the ships." "Are you sure?" KRYN asked, glancing back. The echoes of their pursuers grew closer, the guards now shouting orders, alerting others to their escape. "Positive! If we can reach a ship, we can call for help." They raced through the corridors, dodging crates and equipment strewn across the floor, the facility's dim lighting flickering ominously as they moved. Ethan's mind buzzed with possibilities. "We can't let them capture us again. We have to fight back." As they rounded a corner, a squad of guards appeared ahead, weapons raised. "Stop!" one yelled, finger hovering over the trigger. Ethan skidded to a halt, heart racing. "KRYN!" he shouted, adrenaline surging through him. "Do something!" KRYN nodded, determination hardening his features. "Hold on!" He sprinted to the side, eyes scanning for anything that could be used as a weapon. Grabbing a nearby metal rod, he hurled it at the guards, catching one off guard and sending him sprawling. "Now's our chance!" Ethan yelled, charging forward. He tackled the nearest guard, their bodies colliding with a loud thud. In the midst of the chaos, KRYN shouted, "We can't keep doing this! They'll overwhelm us! We can't stop!" Ethan shot back, determination flooding his veins. "We fight for freedom!" The struggle intensified, blows exchanged in a flurry of motion, each moment a test of will and strength. Just as the tide seemed to turn against them, KRYN's voice pierced the chaos. "I see it! The hangar's just ahead!" Ethan pushed through the pain, eyes locked on the door that loomed before them, a beacon of hope amidst the turmoil. They had to reach it. The sound of their pursuers echoed behind them, relentless and unforgiving. "Together!" Ethan yelled, bolting forward, KRYN by his side. The door swung open, revealing the vastness of the hangar filled with ships. Freedom awaited them, but danger loomed ever closer. They burst inside, but the room was filled with guards. They had entered a battleground. "Ethan!" KRYN shouted, eyes wide. "What now?" "Fight!" Ethan replied, his heart racing. This was their moment, their chance to reclaim their lives, and he would not let it slip away. The hangar loomed before Ethan and KRYN, a cavernous expanse filled with sleek ships, each a testament to human ingenuity and the desire for freedom. Bright emergency lights flickered ominously overhead, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms across the metallic floor. The scent of burning fuel mingled with the metallic tang of fear in the air, an intoxicating mix that pushed Ethan's adrenaline to new heights. "Ethan, we need to move!" KRYN's voice pierced through the chaos as he scanned the hangar, eyes wide with urgency. "They'll be on us in seconds." "Right," Ethan replied, heart racing. "We have to find a ship and get out of here." He propelled himself forward, weaving between the ships like a dancer in an elaborate ballet. The low hum of engines and the distant clang of metal filled the air, amplifying the tension that hung thick around them. They had to act quickly. Each passing moment seemed to thrum with the echo of approaching footsteps. "Over there!" KRYN shouted, pointing toward a small ship tucked away in the far corner, its hull glistening under the harsh lights. "It looks like it's still operational." Ethan's eyes locked onto the vessel, hope igniting within him. "Let's go!" He sprinted toward the ship, determination pushing him forward, each step fueled by the thought of freedom. But as they reached the ship, a heavy thud resonated behind them. The guards were closing in. "Get inside!" Ethan urged, climbing into the cockpit and hastily flicking switches. The console lit up, displaying a multitude of screens and buttons, each one a reminder of the skills he had honed over the years. "KRYN, get that door closed!" KRYN hurriedly slammed the door shut, locking it just as the first guards stormed into the hangar. Ethan's heart raced as he fumbled with the controls. He could hear the guards shouting, barking orders into their comms. The sound sent a jolt of fear through him. Come on, he muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. The ship's systems began to hum to life, but the process felt agonizingly slow. "Ethan!" KRYN's voice quivered, eyes darting to the viewports. "They're coming! We don't have much time!" With a final flourish, Ethan punched the ignition button. The engines roared to life, filling the cockpit with a throaty growl that vibrated through his bones. "Got it!" he shouted triumphantly, but their celebration was short-lived. The ship's alarms blared, a cacophony of warning signals that filled the air with urgency. As the ship began to lift off, the hangar doors slid open with a groan, revealing a squadron of guards armed to the teeth, weapons aimed directly at them. "Stop right there!" one of the guards shouted, his voice echoing throughout the vast space. Ethan's heart raced. "We need to move! Now!" he yelled, gripping the controls tightly as he guided the ship forward. With a powerful thrust, they surged through the hangar, narrowly avoiding incoming fire as the guards unleashed a volley of shots, bolts of energy crackling through the air. "Brace for impact!" KRYN shouted, clutching the seat as they banked hard to the right. The ship shuddered, jolting as bullets grazed the hull, sending sparks flying. "We can't let them hit us!" Ethan shouted, his focus sharpening. He weaved through the hangar, dodging obstacles and avoiding incoming fire as the guards chased them, their shouts fading into the background noise of the ship's engines. With a flick of a switch, Ethan activated the ship's shields, a translucent barrier enveloping them. "That should buy us some time," he said, glancing at KRYN. "But we need to get to the exit before they breach our defenses." KRYN nodded, eyes fixed on the viewports. "I see the opening. It's just ahead. Hold on!" Ethan shouted as he thrust the ship forward, the engines roaring in response. The exit loomed closer, the lights spilling in like a promise of freedom. They burst through the doors, the ship's shields flickering as the energy bolts continued to strike against them. The sight that greeted them outside was both exhilarating and terrifying. The expanse of the planet's surface spread out below, a tapestry of colors and landscapes, but above them loomed a fleet of enemy ships, ominous and foreboding. "Ethan, they're right behind us!" KRYN yelled, his voice rising in urgency. "Don't worry! I've got this!" Ethan gripped the controls tighter, pulling back on the stick as the ship climbed into the sky, evading the enemy vessels closing in around them. "Ready the weapons!" KRYN shouted, scrambling to activate the ship's defense systems. "We can't let them follow us!" Ethan activated the targeting system, heart pounding as he locked onto the nearest enemy ship. "Firing!" he announced, sending a volley of energy bolts hurtling toward their pursuers. The shot struck true, igniting one of the enemy ships in a blaze of fire and metal. "Nice shot!" KRYN cheered, but Ethan's heart sank as he glanced at the enemy fleet. More ships surged forward, the threat intensifying with each passing moment. "Just keep firing!" he shouted, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We can't let them catch us!" The ship shook as enemy fire slammed against their shields, the alarms blaring in protest. Ethan gritted his teeth, determined to push through. "Hold steady!" he yelled, evading incoming shots as he skillfully maneuvered through the chaos. "Ethan, we can't keep this up forever!" KRYN shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "We need a plan!" Ethan's mind raced, searching for a solution. "We head for the mountains. We can lose them in the canyons!" he shouted, setting a course toward the rugged terrain below. "Let's hope you're right," KRYN replied, fingers dancing over the controls as he prepared to engage the ship's cloaking device. As they dove toward the mountains, the ship skimmed dangerously low, dodging rocks and cliffs. The landscape below was a blur of green and brown, the chaos of the chase pushing them closer to their limits. Engaging cloaking, Kerwyan announced, activating the ship's defenses. The ship shimmered for a moment, the viewports flashing as the cloaking device took hold. Ethan glanced back at the pursuing ships, their forms barely visible against the rocky backdrop. They won't be able to track us now, he said, a sense of hope creeping back into his chest. But just as relief washed over him, the ship jolted violently, alarms blaring once more. What now? Kerwyan shouted, gripping the console. Something's malfunctioning, Ethan replied, his heart racing. We need to stabilize the ship. He fought against the controls as the ship shuddered and swayed. In the chaos, a warning flashed across the screen, engines overheating. Emergency shutdown imminent. We need to land, Kerwyan yelled, panic etched across his face. Now! Ethan's mind raced. There! The clearing ahead! He pointed to a small opening in the dense forest. I'll bring us down! With a deep breath, he steered the ship toward the clearing, the engines screaming in protest. The ground rushed up to meet them, and just as the ship began to shake violently, Ethan slammed down on the landing gear. They hit the ground hard, skidding to a stop as the engine sputtered and died. Silence enveloped them, the echoes of the chase fading into the distance. Ethan turned to Kerwyan, breathless. We made it. Not yet, Kerwyan replied, still tense. They'll find us if we don't move. With a determined nod, Ethan unbuckled his harness. Let's go, he said, glancing back at the ship. We need to get as far away from here as possible.